Hey, it's Ray with Sober Without God, and it is time for a Saturday book review. And I am on Stone Barrington book number 8, The Short Forever, written by Stuart Woods. And as part of my Saturday book review, I have been reading Stuart Woods Stone Barrington books now for a while. This book was written in 2003, and it follows the adventures of Detective Stone Barrington. Well, he used to be a New York police detective, and now he's a lawyer who is kind of like a private detective, kind of a Dollar General James Bond, and he goes around solving cases in his spare time. He's kind of rich and good looking and handsome, and he has no moral compass. And if he finds himself in the room with an attractive woman, well, he's going to sleep with her. He only sleeps with one woman in this book, so that's very interesting. He's kind of a dog. But this book, The Short Forever, was actually better than the last couple that he's written. And so a little more recommended than the last couple. The only thing is with The Short Forever, well, I'll tell you a bit about the plot. So he gets approached by someone who says, "Hey, I want you to go. My niece has been kidnapped by someone in London, and I need you to go get her. I think she's messed up with a drug dealer." That's not true. He ends up going to chase after a CIA spook who this guy is trying to track down and chase after him. So it's really a cat and mouse, cloak and dagger game that takes place in London. And Stuart Woods is really fascinated with the layout of London and all the places and the cab rides and the places to eat and what there is to eat there and the countryside. And he goes into great detail, wanting to explain all of it to you, and really gets into the food and the drink and, like I said, the countryside and the cars and everything else. And it kind of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. The character gets confusing. Different characters, they get kind of muddled a little bit. But as the story goes along, it unfolds that everybody's lying to everybody. The CIA's involved. The British Secret Service is a little bit involved, and Stone gets taken for some money, and he gets taken on a wild ride. Dino shows up, his old partner. His old love interest shows up, Sarah, from previous novels. And he ends up thinking he's going to be ended up in bed with Sarah. And, well, sorry, not with Sarah, but with some other woman. And that he has taken to this party. And so he takes this woman to this party where Sarah is going to get engaged, and she's going to marry this guy. And so he says he had just drifted off when Stone switched off the light and was settling in when the door opened and someone entered, and he assumed it was the woman he had taken to the party. A moment later, she was in bed with him, her hands searching and finding what he wanted. Stone joined in enthusiastically, and after a few minutes, they both came noisily. Then it collapsed. He was half asleep when she left the bed and went back to her room, just as well, he thought, since he was exhausted and needed sleep. He had just drifted off when she returned to his bed, snuggling up to him. "What?" he said sleepily. "Sorry I took so long," Monica said, throwing a leg over his. Apparently, in the dark, he slept with Sarah, the woman who was about to get married, and not the woman he brought to the party. So, Stone, you dog, you slept with the woman who's getting married the next day. Well, ends up, Sarah, who he slept with, who's about to get married, ends up accidentally killing her husband on a boat while they're all on board. And that turns out to be interesting. Props out to my boy Stuart Woods, who shouts out my favorite movie of all time that I've got posters up right here and here and here, North by Northwest, and references it in the book. So I was pretty pleased about that. It is kind of a mistaken identity cat and mouse game, kind of like North by Northwest. which I thought was pretty interesting. And there's also this line that made me chuckle a little bit. While Stone gets kidnapped in the middle of the day, taken to a dark room and interrogated by these people, probably the Mossad, and he's questioned and beaten up a little bit in a dark room, and he can't see anybody's faces. And the people interrogating him say, "Mr. Barrington, I can't say I like your attitude." And he says, "I can't say that I like being abducted on a public street, imprisoned, and interrogated by a group of people who have read too many bad novels." Anyway, um, and so there is an interesting little tidbit in here, and I don't know if it's factual or not, but he has a conversation with a cab driver. And if this is true, it's very interesting about cab drivers in London. And the cab driver says that all cab drivers have to have the knowledge. And I'm going to read to you for a second. And the cab driver says that every cab driver must have 2.5 years of training before they become a cab driver in London. And he says, here's what the knowledge is. The knowledge is what every London cab driver has to know before he gets a license. You drive all over town on a motorbike for a year or two, taking notes on addresses, public buildings, pubs, theaters, and tube stops, whatever you see. You go to classes at night, and finally you take the exam. The question would be like, a passenger wants to go from Hempstead Heath to Wormwood Scrubs Prison. Describe the shortest route and name every cross street, public building, and tube stop along the way. Miss one cross street and you missed the question. Miss too many questions and you failed the exam. Get it right and you have the knowledge and you get your license. That's fairly interesting if it's true. And just a little bit of tidbit of history about London. The book has some twists and turns, and like I said, it's fairly interesting if you can keep track. It's one of those books where sometimes if there's too many characters in a book and they're doing too much, I'll keep a list like on the side of who the characters are and what they mean to the story. And there's just a lot of names, and sometimes the names keep changing because people have aliases. And so if that's you and you get lost in a novel, you might want to do that for this book. But it ends up with a decent resolution, and these characters drop by. One of these characters drops by again in a couple of books in the book Reckless Abandon. That was the first Stone Barrington novel I read. So I would say on this one, probably 3.5 Stone Barringtons out of 5. So I would recommend this book called The Short Forever if you are looking for a good Stone Barrington novel. And he's not too much of a dog in this one, although while he is sleeping with Sarah, he does flirt with the British Secret Service agent and does have intentions on getting her into bed while he is trying to get serious with Sarah. But that's the Stone Barrington we've come to know and love. So that's The Short Forever. I hope you enjoy it if you read it. See you next